If for the lights and for the modulation, we have used the light blue and white. In order to continue modulating and to deepen the shadows, what we'll use is one of the blue colors, the darker one, and black. We will continue with the same procedure. We will be applying the masking tape in order to achieve this effect. We've previously worked on the lights and now we'll add shadows, which will be more or less opposite to the lights, to create this effect and increase the contrast in one area as much as in the other. In the shadow area they will be significantly darker and we will not apply lights there. And in the light area, the shadows will contrast with the lights and make the modulation effect stand out more. We can see this on this smaller piece or on this other one. Take a look at how the contrast of the lower one is much more accentuated than when it comes to the upper one. We can achieve this freehand or by using the masking tape. We'll see how it works. Once we have finished masking, using pieces of leftover tape or something like that, we will create shadows. We apply them, remove the tape, and see how they are much more noticeable. And we continue, creating some extra shadows freehand at the edges of the piece. In the back area, we can mark the shadows even more. And again in the union area with the fuselage. We will continue with the lower part and the rest of the pieces. Now we will continue with this one and mark the shadows. I will add a piece of tape wherever I consider it convenient. And now we'll add the shading. We remove the tape and continue with the next area. Let's continue with this one here. We'll take another piece of tape and stick it here. Afterwards, we will proceed with the shading. And then we will do the same thing in another area. We will continue with this one right here and finish. Notice how this way we are making the shadows clearer little by little. We continue. Remember that it's important to be precise with the tape. We have another one here. Take a look at the effect. We will finish with this one. And like that, step by step, we advance with the process. Continuing with the work on our model, after we have finished with the modulation of the surface, the next step will be the painting of all the details. For the details, I tend to use acrylic paint and a brush with a good tip. So with that we will paint all kinds of details. As you can see, we paint all these different details by brush with the colors that come to mind. Moreover, we also use metallic paints on weapons with the dry brush technique. We have applied masking tape to paint in black. You can also see it here, how we paint all the weapons with the dry brush. For the dry brushing technique, you can use this kind of brush from Abteilung or any other brush that you have at home and that you've already used for other purposes. We'll go step by step, using a paper towel to dry the excess. and you apply the dry brush in areas that you deem necessary. The procedure is to paint the details by brush. First, such as this kind of details, we paint in matte black, like here, and then we proceed with the dry brush. The same thing happens with the weapons. As you can see, first we apply some dry brush, and later on we work on profiles and painting of the rest of details. Let's take a closer look at how the dry brush technique works. We get some paint, and then we simply lightly wet the brush and rub off the paint until there's almost no color left on the brush. Then we apply it to the surface by rubbing the brush. We're highlighting all the details, the reliefs, nooks and corners, and all the other parts of the model. We can apply different combinations, we can use this gunmetal paint, and then we can use silver or any other color. Do you see how we can emphasize the engines with this? After we have finished with all the details painted by brush and using the acrylic paint, we will apply the dry brush to some pieces in the lower part of the vehicle. The goal is to achieve a metallic appearance, so we will use the dry brush. I prefer to apply a darker tone first, which is the gunmetal, and then natural steel, in order to obtain more shine. To apply the dry brush, I typically use these brushes. They are quite soft and I find them comfortable to use because of the shape. We will place the paint on a piece of cardboard and use the paper towel to dry the brush. So let's begin. And the only thing we need to do is to put a little bit of paint on the cardboard and we can start. Now, we'll lightly wet our brush and we'll rub it on the paper towel until we see that it is more or less dry. And simply what we need to do is to rub. Do you see how the color is becoming more and more visible? We rub in all directions and we are obtaining that metallic appearance that we are looking for. Later we'll give it another coat, but with the natural steel. Notice the difference between the two of them. Afterwards, the piece will have metallic appearance. What we're doing is to emphasize the upper parts, reliefs, edges, and so on. We'll continue applying the first coat, the first color elsewhere, and then we'll apply the natural steel. We have finished with the first color, which was the darker one, and now we'll continue with natural steel. We'll again place some on the cardboard. Do you see the difference between the two colors? This one is somewhat lighter than the other one. And again, we'll wet the brush, dry it with the paper towel, and start rubbing. You can see now how this color is really lighter. With this one, we will not be as insistent. We'll go to the edges and repeat the process, paying attention especially to the metal parts. And with this we are finished. The advantage of using this type of colors, despite them being metallic, is that since they are acrylic, we can apply any enamel effect over them as it won't be detrimental to them. And this is the finish. The top part is the one that has the natural steel, and the one underneath only has shiny metallic paint. This one is lighter. Let's finish and take a look at the assembly. Before continuing with the next phase of painting, which would be the weathering of the model, we need to start to build it. As you can see, I've already assembled the side parts, the end part and so on, and I need to finish the covers, for which we use the liquid glue and either the applicator that comes with it or any kind of a synthetic brush, so that we can reach some areas which would be hard to do with the applicator. So once we have finished to assemble all the parts, we will continue with the aging of the vehicle. Let's continue with the work on our speeder. And before proceeding to apply weathering, washes and other effects, what we need to do is to apply decals. We can find the decal sheet inside the box of the model. For this step, we'll mainly need a cutter, some tweezers so that we can work with the decals, a brush and water. I typically recommend to always use setting agents. These ones work very well. There are two liquids, and we applied the number 1 first, then the decal, and finally the number 2. And we'll dry the surface a little with some paper towels. If we are applying decals over a glossy surface, we will avoid any differences in appearance between the surface and the decal, or making visible the surface that surrounds the decal so that it can be placed on the model. Let's see how it works. And we continue. Let's see how we can apply some of these decals. As you can see, we have already applied some. We submerged them. You can see how they've detached from the support sheet. Now we get the liquid, the microset with number 1, and apply it over the surface. We take the decal carefully using the brush and leave it on top of the surface. Now with the help of some tweezers, we place it correctly. When you see that it's straight and centered, we only need to carefully use a paper towel to absorb the excessive liquid and apply it to the surface, avoiding wrinkles. We can use a bit more liquid on top. And now we proceed with number 2. Again, we cover the entire surface and leave it for a couple of seconds so that it can take effect. We can dry the excess with the brush, and again we apply pressure with the paper towel in order to avoid any wrinkles or imperfections. As you can see, this is the process. And we'll continue with the others until we are finished.